Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So, if you saw the intro, then you know that I got rims and tires on that vehicle. Gave you a little bit of teaser in my last video about that. And truth is I actually filmed this whole thing, probably about a week ago after I put them on with intentions of putting the video out pretty much the next day. But then I thought about it and I said, I probably should actually get some miles on these tires, at least a little bit, to see what I'm working with, because there's going to be some things that are going to pop up that are going to not necessarily be there when it's sitting in the driveway, and I haven't driven it that much. And then I thought, you know what, why not give a little bit of a background on some of the stuff that I had to consider when I went into upgrading that wheel and changing the tires, right? So what did I end up with? Well, I ended up with the Nitto Ridge Grappler. And I went through a lot of different tires, but that's the one I chose. I liked the look of it, and so far so good. I'm pretty happy with it. And then yes, we upgraded the rim size as well. So not only is it an inch wider, we went from an 8-inch rim from the stock rim to a 9-inch rim, but we also went 2 inches larger in diameter. And that is basically a factory rim size. It's actually a little wider, I think, than the factory rims are, but a 20 inch is a standard rim offering in some of the trim packages on that truck. The tire that I put on there as far as size, same thing. Standard size offering in some of the trim packages on that truck, because it can fit a couple different size rims, many different size rims, depending on what you want to do. So what are some of the things I had to consider before we get into how everything turned out? You change the rim, you got to make a determination of some of the measurements that you're actually going to spec. And so let's start out right here. So the first thing I had to think about, outside of going bigger, which obviously, was how far out that wheel was going to stick from the face of the hub, basically where it mounts, where the lugs are. And so if you take your rim, let's look at the old one for example. We've got an 8-inch rim, which means dimensions across 8 inches. If we put a line right down the center, that means I've got 4 on each side. That is the center line of the rim. And then our offset, whether positive or negative, so this would be the truck side, this would be facing out from the truck. Depending on how far out this way I go or how far back this way I go, is going to decide for me where that rim sits inside the wheel well and how much it projects farther past the outside of the body of the truck. So with a positive offset, that's the way the factory wheels were. They were a plus 24 millimeter, which means we take that center line and we go this way 24 millimeters, which isn't very aggressive. You look at a lot of factory wheels, the cool part of the wheel, the part that we can see, is actually much farther out towards the edge of that rim, because they want to tuck everything in underneath the body. But plus 24, if you were to have a negative offset here, what that would do is start to push the wheel out. If I've got a positive offset from center line, the farther I go out, the more that wheel gets tucked back inside underneath the wheel well of the truck. So again, I just told you, factory Nissan, 23, 24, 25, depends on the type of wheel that was optioned on your truck, but that's about what it is. It's not a very aggressive stance. What I ended up doing is, one, I bought a wheel that was actually 9 inches in width rather than 8 inches. So we've got an extra inch to play with, which means we got to fit that rim underneath the truck without it hitting anything. And what I ended up doing was going with a plus 12 millimeter offset. And what that did is it actually brought the center line, from the center line, it brought the mating face of that wheel back towards the center line, which pushes the wheel out a little bit. So I was able to compensate a little bit for the extra width, basically a ½ inch on each side from that center line, that would have possibly ended up rubbing on something. I was able to push that wheel out. But what that does is, not only did I have a wider rim, and I decreased the offset back towards center line, pushing that wheel out from the truck, well, that means that I might actually have to get fender flares. Now, looking at it, I think I'm good. In my area, it is a possibility. They don't really want it sticking out past the body line of the vehicle, but the way that I got it look at it, is that I think we're good. So hopefully we don't need fender flares, because I really don't like fender flares that much, especially the deep pocket style, and that's apparently all we can get for these trucks, unless you go and buy like the Pro 4X fender flares from the factory, and they're $150 each. So you're looking at, what, $600? Forget it, it's not worth it. Then you got to get them painted if you want it to match. I really don't want to do that. I mean, it would look good, but I'm much more of a minimalist type of guy. So that's what we had to deal with when we talked about offset. And then we had to decide, again, what type of tire and what size tire we were going to go with. But we also had to get a bolt pattern for these rims. And so the bolt pattern for this truck is 6 on 139.7. So 6 lugs, and widest point between 2 lugs, center line of the lug here, center line of the lug here is 139.7 millimeters. So what did that give me? That had a very specific bolt pattern I had to accommodate, which is very easy to find. It's a common thing. And then lastly, I had to figure out what type of lugs I had on the truck. And so the lugs on the non-SD Titans are M12, which is metric, 12 millimeter, and then 1.25 inch conical seat acorn style lug. And for that particular type of rim, I had to use a tuner style lug. So that's got a multi-bolt pattern. It's actually good for, I think, 6 on 5.5 and 6 on 139.7. So there's actually a total of 12 holes in that rim, but they have a pocket that's pretty deep, and I had to use a tuner style lug to get it in there. So I actually went with an 1.5 inch lug rather than an 1.25 inch, and it didn't make a difference. It's just a little bit longer, but it's also what I could find, because lo and behold, I only ordered enough to do 20 lugs. Well, you do the math. What's 6 times 4? Yeah, it's 24. So I ordered that off of Amazon. Well, that ain't gonna work. So I had to go and find, luckily I was able to find some locally that were pretty much the same. Lugs are covered on those rims anyway. They have a cover that uses some Allen keys and screws in over top of it. You never see the lugs. And there's one more thing I didn't mention here. Depending on your size of rim, the hub bore is going to be different. So what does that mean for me? Well, if you have a hub-centric rim, which ironically enough, the original factory rims on the truck are hub-centric. So you got a little bit of a hub that sticks out on the mating surface of the truck for where the wheel bolts onto. And the back side of that rim actually slides perfectly onto that and centers it on the hub with the axle, so that your lug nuts and your lug bolts don't have to do that, or your studs. So if you get one that's bigger, it isn't going to be hub-centric anymore, and you're actually putting a lot of faith on those lugs to center that rim, and every once in a while you can get it so when it travels out of rounds because it's not bolted on correctly. So you have to get a set of hub-centric rings if you've gone larger on your hub bore and your new wheels, which I did. Those were, don't quote me on it, but they were 100 and some millimeter, and I believe that the factory ones are like 78 millimeter, 78.5 millimeters. So that's a big difference. I had to get some hub-centric rings. I got them off of Amazon. I just put in what I wanted the outer diameter to be and what I wanted the inner diameter to be, so that the inner diameter would slide over the hubs on the truck, and then the outer diameter would take up that space and fit perfectly into the back of the new wheel. And they worked out great. So they were like $16 on Amazon, the plastic, and they don't really get a lot of wear and tear, so I went with the plastic ones. I've used those before. This is the third set of rims that I've ever put on a vehicle aftermarket. And each one of those sets of rims that I've done over the past 15 years has had to use hub-centric rings, just to be on the safe side. You might be able to get away with it, especially if you've got a rim that is near factory spec, so you probably won't have to worry about it. Just keep that in mind when you're ordering these things. You order them from a big wheel and tire company like Discount Tire Direct, you're probably going to end up getting a set of hub-centric rings altogether. But keep in mind, I piecemealed this whole thing together. Couldn't find the rims I wanted or the tires I wanted in stock in any one place. And then lastly, that brings us over to our size of tire. So our size of tires, factory tire size was 265, 75, 18. We went up to 275, 60, 20. Easiest part is this, 18 and 20 are the rim diameters, right? But what about these, 265 and 275? Well, 265 and 275 is the section width. Across the tire, its widest point, section of the tire, that is what it is, it's millimeters. 265 millimeters, 275 millimeters. So they are wider on the new tire. And then we've got our aspect ratio, and that is a function of the section width. And what that gives us is a height for the tire, as far as, from the wheel out to the outer edge of the tread. And so 60 is definitely a lower profile than 75. So the larger you go, the more tire you ended up with, but keep in mind, it is a function of section width as well. So kind of hard to quantify that. But this is what you need to know. This tire is a lower profile, but it's bigger. So therefore, we didn't really lose too much. But keep in mind, the more you decrease that profile, probably the rougher the ride's going to get for you. It's because it doesn't have as much sidewall to take up all that balance and absorb some of that impact. But these are definitely wider tires, not aggressively wider, but they are wider. And I can't give you an exact number there because these tires are actually designed to fit a variety of widths of rim, usually a 3 or 4 inch. I'm sorry, 3 or 4 inch. That would be a lot. 2 or 3 inch width range there. So keep that in mind. So yes, we did go bigger. Now, one more thing that you might not think about if you're trying to put tires on a vehicle and you don't want to disassemble the old rims and tires, which I didn't. You have to get new TPMS sensors. Now, in my area, we get our cars inspected every year. It's actually not an inspection item. So if you don't have a functioning TPMS system, it doesn't matter, they don't fail you. But I wanted it all to work because this truck's only a few years old and I wanted it all to function well. So I ended up getting a Schrader aftermarket TPMS sensor, which was, I don't know, I think they were like $25. Got them off of Rock Auto and they bolted right in. You have to make sure that when you do that, if you do it yourself, the outside nut that actually slides over and torques everything down, it's got an inner seal. Make sure you know how much you need to torque that down to. So in my case, it was 71 inch-pounds, and I've got like 4 torque wrenches, small, medium, large, 1/4 inch, 3/8, and I have 2 halves. So it turned out not to be an issue. Using my 1/4 inch, set it to inch-pounds, I was good to go, and torqued it down to 71 inch-pounds. I wasn't sure how that was going to go, so let's talk about mounting and balancing. Well, obviously I'm not doing that myself. So I took that over to a local company, Matus Discount Tire. And I've gotten some tires from them before and have them put on. So those guys, they go about $1 per inch of rim size for each tire to mount and balance. So it cost me $80 to get all 4 mounted and balanced. And already had the tire sensors installed. So brought them home. Thanks to Ronnie, thanks to Nick for Mavis Discount Tire for fitting me in on a really, really busy weekend. And I dropped them off, picked them up like 5 hours later. Good to go. Threw them in the back of the truck, came home, and I had to bolt them on. Just couldn't wait. It was late. Still wanted to see what it looked like. So with that said, put them on. And that truck, you got to drive it around in order to get any readings. And lo and behold, guess what happened? It read exactly what I wanted it to. I didn't have to program them. So if you get a universal tire pressure monitoring sensor, you might have to program it using one of those program tools, and it's going to cost you some money if you don't own one. You're going to have to take it somewhere, and they're going to charge you because they can. Some places, some tire shops can do it. Otherwise, you might have to take it back to the dealer. But do yourself a favor, do your homework ahead of time. I said Schrader makes one that's actually specifically designed for Nissans of this type, and it interfaces with that onboard computer and the TPMS system, no problem. And so, yep, it displayed the exact tire pressure on my gauge pod, and I've had no issues. It took a couple, minutes of road time to initialize them and then for them to start reading, but so far so good. Haven't had any issues. Just keep in mind your TPMS sensors are not good for a lifetime. They are good for, 5 to 7 years, I think is what they say. I've had them last 10, but afterwards, got to make the decision of whether or not you're going to replace them. So that's why I wasn't going to use the factory ones. I didn't feel like getting the rims split off the tire anyway. But truck's 3 years old, probably not worth it to install 3-year-old sensors, knowing that in possibly 2 years I'm going to have to replace them anyway if one of them goes bad. Who knows? Maybe all 4 of these brand new ones will take a dump and it won't matter. We'll find out. But with that said, that brings us to the end of all of our math talk. So what you probably want to know is, how do they ride? Well, they ride differently. So yes, a little bit wider as far as how far that tire sticks out. So it actually doesn't have quite as much body roll, but it's not going to change that much. But the tire is stiffer. It is wider. The aspect ratio is obviously a narrower aspect ratio. So yeah, it rides a little bit rougher, but it's a truck. I expected it to do that. I'll tell you what I wasn't 100% happy about, and some of the online reviews weren't 100% accurate with this. They said, oh, this is one of the quietest tires. Well, it might be quiet for its type, but nah, I can still hear it quite a bit. But keep in mind, I was coming from these old General Grabber pieces of crap, the HTSs that were a factory tire. It came on the truck. And of course, they were quiet. They were basically a passenger car tire. Wasn't much tread left on them either, so no big deal. But this one is definitely louder. I can definitely hear it. I'll get used to it because I knew that going into it, but it would have been nice if they were a little bit less loud. Now, keep in mind, this truck is a bit of a pavement princess. I might not be taking it off-road too often. I did kind of the other day, and it did okay, but we're not talking aggressive, high centering on the trails and things like that where I have to winch myself out or anything. No, not so much. So far so good. That is about the only thing that I can really complain about is the noise. There's a little bit of vibration at higher speeds, but that's to be expected with that type of tire. It's not going to shake the truck apart. But I can live with it, and like I said, I come from a lifetime of messing around with cars, and I remember when 35, 36, 37-inch super swampers were the thing. So tire noise, that's tire noise. It's basically a borderline combination mud terrain / all-terrain tire, the Ridge Grappler is. Another thing to keep in mind, when I had them balanced, the Ridge Grappler anyway, and you can compare this to a couple other tires that have a similar setup, black sidewall, I hate the raised white lettering. It's just not my thing. If you like that sort of thing, good on you. It's just not my thing. So I wanted to make sure I went with a black sidewall tire. But that tire, I'm pointing at it like you can see it. You can't. It's over there. Has two different sidewalls. One sidewall is quote unquote more aggressive, and all I could really see is that they actually have like a little cutout block on it on the same type of pattern. And then there's a quote less aggressive sidewall pattern. I've mounted the more aggressive out. Just make sure that you know that, and that your tire installer knows that, because you could very well end up with a mismatched sidewall just based on how they install them, because those are not unidirectional tires. They're omnidirectional. They can be mounted anywhere in any configuration. So keep that in mind. So I am happy. Yes, this is what I've wanted to do for a while. I knew the truck was missing something, and it's always been rims and tires from day one that I wanted to. Putting the lift on, the lift that I installed last year, I don't even remember what the name of it is. Oh yeah, Ready Lift. So see my very first video that I posted on the Titan. It accommodates up to a 33-inch tire, and if you do the math on this, that is exactly what this is. This is a 32.99-inch diameter tire when all is said and done and properly inflated. So we hit exactly where we wanted to be. I didn't want to go much more than that. And it looks good under the truck. I'd have to go with a more aggressive lift if I were to put bigger tires and change the back spacing, or I should say the offset, because back spacing, offset, they're not synonymous, but they do end up meaning the same thing. So what does that mean? Well, yeah, if you're really into super aggressive big tires, you're probably going to have to go bigger. I checked and made sure nothing rubs on these, and that's a plus, because I would fail inspection every year if they rubbed. And I really don't want to have to pull them off and put the old factory tires back on. In fact, I'm planning on selling them, because somebody always needs a crash rim. Try to recoup some of my losses. All told, I have a little less than $2,000 involved in this whole rim and tire package, which I think that's about average. You can go much higher. For me, that's where I wanted to keep it. And I think this is pretty much going to start to narrow down what we're going to be doing with the Titan for a little bit. Got a couple more things I want to do. I want to get some rock rails instead of those Nerf bars on the side. They're calling them rock rails, but I have a pair picked out that are a little bit more aggressive and cooler looking. Having vinyl wrapped the bumpers. One of the things is I am not a vinyl wrapping guy. Turned out okay, but over the summer, as things got hotter, the vinyl actually started to shrink a little bit more, so I do have some chrome starting to peek out there. And I think what we're going to end up doing, now that I tried on the color, we're definitely going to paint and either color match or matte black out those bumpers with an automotive 2-stage paint, most likely. It's going to take a lot of prep, and that's going to be a next spring project, because I just don't have the time with the weather being what it is and starting to get colder. Theoretically, it's going to be in the 80s this week. Who knows, I might actually get back in the pool. Haven't closed it yet. But I think we are going to do that, and we're actually going to put some longevity into those bumpers. But that's a next year project. So that's where we're at right now, guys. Let me know what you think. If you don't like it, well, let me know. I'll listen. If you do like it, good on you. Thank you. If you don't care, awesome. But either way, go ahead and hit that like button. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's really cool to see. I've seen a lot of people hopping on board recently with this truck content. And, you know, hey, we're a small group. Chevy, Ford, Dodge, yeah, they're always making fun of the Nissan owners. You got Toyota in there. They're always in their own little world, and they haven't changed much. New Tacoma, new Tundra's coming out. But guess what, guys? They've gone to a twin-turbo V6, just like Ford did. If you're a V8 guy, you're starting to get less and less options. Ford, they've got that 5-liter. That's probably not going to be around in the next generation of trucks. Nissan, the only engine you can get is that 5.6-liter V8, which I'm pretty impressed with. It's torquey enough. It's got enough horsepower. One more thing I want to do to the truck, and that's probably going to be some time because it's still expensive. You're talking $700-800. Stillen makes a really nice exhaust. Single outlet for this truck. I'm not a big dual guy, but single outlet for this truck. It's like, $700 or $800. Bolt on. Cat back, but it adds like 35 horsepower, something stupid, and it's in the power band too. It's at the upper end of that 3,000 RPM range. It's usable power. Most of these other bolt-ons and stuff like that, where do you end up making your power? Like 5,000 RPM. Well, you can't use it up there. You don't run your truck at 5,000 RPM if you're smart. So theoretically, it's there. Now keep in mind, where does your truck usually sit when you're rolling down the highway? Yeah, probably between 1,500 and 2,000 RPM, right? 7-speed automatic. So something to think about for the future. I think that's where we're headed, is a Stillen exhaust. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a little bit out of that, out of my pseudo math. This is my oil changing board in my garage. So hey, we're gonna leave this up here and make it look like it's really cool when people come in to visit and like I'm super smart, but I'm not. I'm probably dumber than a bag of hammers. But thanks again. I promise I'll see you soon. You stay classy.